Recording in progress. Hey, Fred.
It's pretty funny, that one. Hey. So we started on Friday, with a bit of moving away from Visual Meta, as I think we did last Monday too, but because it's kind of done for now anyway. And it's funny, the discussions go all over the place, as they should at this point, but also towards that kind of timeline thing, you know? So I wonder where we will go today.
Yes. I have a couple of things that I'm writing down, which I think will be better to send it to you in email form so you can read it better. But it has to do with both the symposium and the book. And also, the email is not working for me and for Laura. We tried to access it and we were getting some errors, and I can't figure out why.
Okay, let's just try it together then.
Let me see. Frode, England. cPanel, here it is. Can you see my screen?
Can do.
Oops. So here I have mail settings.
I can't read that because of your super wide setup.
Let me let me change my screen resolution.
Let's go into that later. Actually, let's just send me screenshots of the errors, and then we'll approach it. I think either Alan's video is frozen and he's a conference, or his video off today.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Hey, Alan.
I just thought I'd pop in. If you guys are talking about something else, I can jump off, but just wanted to say howdy.
No, we were just going to go into a few things for the conference and stuff, but we can do that on other times. And I know Mark is running from the coffee machine, and I'm not sure about Adam today, but he'll probably be here. So I just saw that Vint will be talking about Visual Meta in the next, October editorial for ACM Communications. So that's really good, helping it get another step of respectability. So now we can spend more of this time dreaming and going in other directions. Hello, Peter.
Good morning.
Morning. We were just celebrating Edgar today, because today Edgar is 4 years, 3 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day old. So we went to Krispy Kreme for donut.
Nice.
Yeah.
Krispy Kreme. Oh, they have Krispy Kreme in Europe.
Yes.
Cool.
You know, we have running water too.
No, I mean, it's just fast food tends to be different. It's mostly US based. I used to love to I used to love to go to Krispy Kreme to get, that Long John with chocolate on top.
So I hear there are lots of books there too.
Yeah, books and donuts, that's what we're about.
Books and donuts.
And Mr. Anderson.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
So now that Adam is not here, at least yet, and Adam is at this point quite good at pointing us in a direction, what do you guys feel like is a worthwhile topic to start with today? Basically, we have two options, timeline or other things.
The timeline is always good. And it feels like timeline is always catching up.
Timeline do you mean?
We've been
timeline interface or the timeline to get publication?
We mean a system, for instance, having these calls recorded and transcribed, of course, but also with real time in the video stream, so we can refer back to what Peter said at 1:15, for instance, and how we can then go back to that point that he made and make a new video or audio or textual comment that can be shared with a group and stuff like that.
This might be useful for this conversation. It's a service that automatically transcribes video. It's pretty good.
Descript is amazing and has a special place in my heart. So that even could, I'm a huge fan of it. And it also is I bring it up back in the time when we did talks. I would use it as an example of the sorry, this is a side note, but a harbinger of what AI and UI could actually look like. Because it does the transcription, but you can go in. It's not like the way transcription is often done is like, here is the AI transcription of your document. Boom, deal with it. and in this case, you can go in and change the words, and it'll learn from that. And you can cut out, say if you're saying like I'm doing now, placeholder dialogue that just doesn't even need to be in the audio version. You can cut that out, truncate it. I'm sure Raphael, you're more familiar with it, but yeah, I love it, and it's actually a touchstone for what the future of text or what interfaces could be like.
Alan, you're writing a piece for the book, right? Volume 2?
Yes.
Good. That's interesting. So what kind of things does it export? What formats?
The audio,
No, the transcription.
What formats is the transcription in? It's a good question.
I think I haven't tried exporting it yet.
Because just, Peter, I see you have your hand up, but just quickly, because we talked about fun things last week, like you could press a button to note that a piece of video or time is interesting, but even if you could do something as simple as somebody says something interesting and you just say, that's interesting, then you have the keyword, or rather keywords, that's interesting. It should be able to then instantly jump to the transcript for the place where you think it's interesting. So it's just like a social tagging rather than having to do computer buttons. So if it exports as basic text or something, then then I can even put it into Reader, and maybe even special affordances for it.
This is the help file that talks about all the export options. So you can export in HTML, Markdown, DocX, TXT, and rich text format.
Fantastic, very interesting. Yeah, Peter, sorry for jumping in on you there.
Okay, I was thinking maybe we could use quasi-modes. Imagine if your touch bar had a set of synthetic buttons representing different kinds of conversational keys, maybe citation, example, this is interesting, 4 or 5 of them, whatever we think is the tightest core that we could break down kinds of interest in a segment of video, and you could touch 1 or more of them simultaneously during the conversation, and that would cause those points to be timestamped. Basically, the touchdown event on the touch bar would insert those tags at that point, and then it would insert the end tag as soon as you let go. That way, you could be in the middle of a history discussion, lift up for a second, touch correction to correct some other comment, touch back to the history discussion, and pick it up. So you could indicate the interleaving of the topics potentially overlapping one another. That's the key. You want to have the start and the end events for each one of the quasi modes to be independent of the others so that they can be fired off simultaneously. Also, I'd like to call your attention, I don't remember which year it was, but at one of the CHI conferences that was held in Pittsburgh, there was a discussion of CMU doing some work on logging video, automatic transcription of it. I think they got some sort of a Defense Department grant or something that was funding the work back then. So roughly circa 2000-ish, maybe, whenever the nearest CHI conference was to having been in Pittsburgh in that general time frame. Which, by the way, is an interesting kind of a search query that we might want too, combining time with geography.
Yeah, time and geography are interesting things to put together.
And Peter, a bunch of your ideas, you end up talking about quasi modes, and I don't know if I understand 100%, but is it when, for example, you do a command and then it stays up until you exit it? How, like, when you talk about quasi modes, what exactly, like how exactly do you
that was a
imagine in your
term
head?
that Jeff Raskin used extensively. I'm not sure whether he introduced it or not, but all of his interfaces were dependent on that. And the notion was he didn't like modes, but yes, exactly. In there, he talks about it. Yes, that's the book.
Okay.
You both have it. Good. Should always be close. Every programmer's computer.
Yeah.
Yes.
But his idea was to enter the mode by depressing a particular key, and that would enter the quasi mode, but it would only work as long as that key was depressed.
That one, I guess.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to cover Freud's window so you can't see that book.
Books to keep close by.
Yeah.
So you couldn't forget that you were in it because it would only be active while you were consciously engaging it.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So it in a way, it's kind of like the quick menu that has been used in a bunch of times nowadays, with where you press Command K, it brings up a menu, you type something in, and then you finish what you have to do, and then it goes back to the interface.
Not quite. More like using a modifier key.
Okay.
If I look busy, that's because I am. I downloaded Descript, and I'm just wondering how it can work in our workflow.
There's also, Loom has a transcription ability, but it's not as deep as Descript for sure. And then I think Gong is probably too enterprise, but Gong is amazing as far as the apps that are similar.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, what I think would be really, really worthwhile is if we had it each running on our machines, so it would know who said what at high level of probability.
Yes. The script does that.
It does. So yeah, that's how we make a team. Is that how it works?
You identify, he identifies that there are voices that are different, and then you name those voices, and then he looks for patterns,
When you say he, you mean the software, right?
Yeah, the software looks for, did I say he as in the software? Well, the software, it looks for patterns.
Software has pronouns now.
Yes.
Maybe we should say they.
Well, I suppose this.
Hang on. Yeah, sorry.
So this gets us around the existential problem of knowing how to know you're just about to say something really significant.
I'm just going to look at one of our old recordings that I have on here. This is kind of fun for all of us to do together. So let me just say tiny one, if there's any audio on it at all. Oh, yeah, this is not tiny, 95. Okay, I did a drop in. Hang on. I do love bootstrapping of what works. Your transcript will be ready in a few minutes. This is so exciting, guys.
I have to change my internet.
No. Don't we all agree that having a really powerful and really, really simple kind of diary or calendaring or timeline or history function for especially our work meetings that's really accessible would be a hugely useful thing?
Yes, because then something like a glossary to quickly find topics that we talked about would be insanely helpful.
No, I'd agree. I was thinking exactly that as Fred said it. So in a sense, the real probably leverage upwards comes not just from the fact you recorded the places in the transcript or in the conversation, but then being able to make some sort of an index so you can move around it.
Yeah, putting the transcript into Logseq. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's not as if humanity hasn't been here before, and I was just sort of reading a book at the moment that's all about early sort of how referencing and citation and indexes and glossaries sort of came to be. We're sort of, Kelsey Priest, we're sort of having to revisit some of these for the digital age, but I think many of the affordances are sort of there if we know where to look.
Alan, what do you think are the interesting issues to work on now that we're just having fun, at least in dialogue?
I have to almost reboot some of where we've been at lately, because there's just been a lot to think about. I will say, because this is right on my table, this is a book I've just started, and it's pretty great. And
hang on,
what's kind of wonderful is, so it's David Clark.
Okay.
And Designing an Internet. What's delightful at the beginning is just how much he's talking about his teacher, mentor, Vint Cerf, and maybe this does apply a little bit. I think I even brought this up a little bit last time or alluded to it. The architecture of the internet that Vint wanted was a minimal architecture, right? So very few actual rules and a whole lot of parochial recommendations. This is how we'd like things to work, but you can do it any way you want. And so it starts out with the advantages and disadvantages of that approach. When I think of PDF, it seems there's a lot of overlap with what's happening with Visual Meta, because on one side there's the temptation of getting it easy enough and straightforward enough that it gets adoption, right? The counter example of that would be the semantic web, where they tried very much to solve the problem as they understood it, and then made something that was just too hard to get into and see reward, right? To get something back. So there is a kind of a relationship between Visual Meta and some of the motivations there. On one side, if you say all rules are off, we're only concerned about this one sort of a road or protocol, the way the internet is, then it opens the doors up for anybody to bring whatever sort of into Visual Meta packages or whatnot. And then maybe it becomes a whole big mess again, like we saw with the web. But then if you optimize too narrowly, it becomes a big hit early on, and then it doesn't adapt to later changes or replacement. It winds up getting replaced entirely by something else, which may even be the goal. And I don't think that's a bad goal, to actually replace PDF as a format and have a newer version have the ideas of Visual Meta baked in. But anyway, that's just the thoughts that the book brought up, made me think about.
That's interesting. I'm trying to get in touch with John Warnock to get his perspective, but so far it's been a struggle. But
there's a couple of other things too. Yeah, on that note, so David D. Clark might be a great person to reach out to for Future of Text. A couple of other people. There's a podcast called Metamuse. I keep thinking Metamucil, but it's Metamuse. And the latest episode is about text. And I think that it's the guy who created Muse. I wrote his name down. He seems, both of them that host the podcast would be great to reach out to and get their take on future of text, as well as some of their guests, Jeffrey Litt being one of them. Could be a great person to talk, to get their opinion, because they all seem to be involved in that space of rethinking programming, how it lines up with writing, etc.
So when you said Muse, you don't mean Adobe Muse. I mean that.
Correct. Do not mean Adobe Muse.
Okay, so I have to pretend that I already know this.
Wiggins is his last name.
Yeah, this is obviously a little bit related to what Raphael's doing and quite related to what Adam's doing.
Adam Wiggins.
Just having a look here.
I can throw links into the chat about the podcast. The one from August 5th is about text. I don't know that they have a guest on that one, but just, you know, the fact that they're talking about it, it's pretty interesting.
Podcasts are something that I don't listen to a lot, but if I know that nowadays we're getting text descriptions of the whole podcast, which is great because I can read. I prefer to read than to listen. But I would love to hear this one on text. Looks really good.
Yeah, it would be wild to agreed about the podcast. And the transcript alone is often not good enough. This actually kind of links back to Descript. It would be amazing if we could make a podcast like we're doing now. In a sense, this is a podcast of sorts, and have the transcript then be processed, compiled, or transformed into like a consumable essay or blog post, you know, where the segments are broken out. It can be multiplayer like this, but you get the main points bubbled up to the top, and not this whole, like, even the last 5 minutes of me talking has been getting to a point. So all that can be cut down and just be like, this is what he talked about, you know?
Because I think, I mean, I'm sure I've seen people do that, but I'm sure they spend a tragically large amount of time, you know, where it happens, people have put in a heroic amount of effort to do that because it's effectively all being done, you know, in real time and things. And that's one of the things I sort of find with podcasts is that I end up listening to them having gone in for a certain thing. So the entry point is, and with no, you know, no disrespect to their sponsors and things, but I have, you know, it's just not wanting to sit and listen to them through the preamble, because it's not like sitting down to watch a, you know, telly show or something. And yeah, you know, I respect that people are doing this, and some have to use the time. Sorry, I see Peter's got his hand up, so I'm going to get a word in edgeways.
Yeah, we also want to make sure there's some sort of redaction mechanism in case someone makes a too honest comment about an association's leadership or a conference committee or a thesis advisor. So you have to have some way to be able to blot something out to make sure that it doesn't go forward. Of course, then I could see someone wanting to go through and search on where are the redactions, to listen to a little bit before the redaction and a little bit after the redaction to try to figure out where the conversation had been headed.
There's always an anti-pattern.
Yeah.
So I just got the transcript done. It's pretty damn good. And then I just copied and pasted into Author without doing any recognition. I wonder what this is. Oh, that's what that is. So now, yeah. It is incredible how many ums and ah. So yeah, just even going through this, one of our recent meetings, we do use the word interesting a lot. Have a look at this.
It's got an ERS PM count, has it then?
Yeah,
I love those statistics.
This is not useful. Okay, so you can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's one transcript. You can see there's a lot. So I'm just going to do.
Is that from 1 hour conversation?
Yeah.
How many pages was that?
I don't actually know. Oh, this is, okay, so Visual Meta now exports the entire document as well. Very tiny for other stuff, but that's obviously not useful for finding. So, you know, if you click on something like this, we can see, but this is what it looks like in the app. I think this is pretty damn impressive. Like you said, you can, you know, the speaker, we have to remember when we train it, how many speakers it should be looking for. Then we give them names afterwards.
So can I, for the interesting use case, I don't mean to continue. I don't mean to interrupt, but
I was completely finished.
Okay.
I really have to purge any uhs and ums from my conversation now.
Yeah, that would be. This is funny. This is some of the ideas I talked about with Ian at Codex. Some of the things that I would love would be, and this is just a side point. I'll put it aside, but after I get done with it. But one, multi-select that is beyond even just in code editors. You can do like Command D and select everything that is, you know, the same word throughout the code and sort of change it uppercase. But multi-select, where you can actually say, you know, click the way you would files, but you're clicking on words and phrases or dragging, highlighting and saying, I'm capturing that, I'm capturing this over here, I'm capturing this over here. Now I want to treat them all the same, or like I either want to push them over to the map or I want to collect them somehow, you know, like copy and from there make a description that will be used to define X. And the same way that you could say like, I would love to see like use a lasso to define the area that you want to select and then go in and deselect the parts, you know, the reverse. That's just fun stuff for later. But what I was getting at with the interesting, as you mentioned, that's said throughout, and it has a natural ability of saying, this is a point that I want to refer to. That's interesting. You're usually saying to someone else who said something, and you're adding in your bit of a take on it. So it is a fun entry point to conversations. It would be really cool to say, take all the interestings, show them to me like you just did. From there, either push them over into a map where interesting would be the center point, but similarly, I guess what I'm trying to get at is for author or reader, I'd love to see disposable maps where you're saying, I'm just going to very quickly take anything related to interesting, toss it over here. Now it's separate. Now I can cut out the ums and ahs and the bits and then get the key point that came off of interesting. I'm not even interested in interesting anymore. Now I have these 5 things. Of those, 3 of those I want to put back into the real map, right? And I'll just leave this one hanging out as my scratch pad for a while. You know, does that make sense?
Very ambitious, but yeah.
And what I always keep thinking on ebooks is a way to extract all the information that is in the book in a way that is like, for example, here is a list of all the names that were cited in the book, just a name list, and then here's another list of all the dates that has been used, and then maybe it understands places. You know, it's basically connecting a dictionary to the book and then seeing, you know, what are adjectives, what are verbs, what are names, what are dates. Because that way you kind of have a bird's eye view of the content from the book. And then from there, you would go on to something like Frode's Reader, where you could, you know, see the connections and see the citations, where things were cited, where things were used. And that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do.
Sorry,
please go on.
No. I was just confirming, and I know you have the table of contents view that shrinks it.
Yeah, but that's if headings have been assigned. I was just going to show I have this one, Command-Shift-N for names.
Oh, there was a typo on that page, Frode. There was Visual Meta with 2 T's.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that, but yeah, it hasn't. I'm sure I needed to teach it that kind of stuff, but this in itself is useful.
It is.
Not in this version, because in this version it only jumps to the heading. So there's only one heading. So it's all it does is really show you what's in there, but it's still a thing.
But
Yeah.
isn't part of this, I mean, the thing that made me sort of stand up to this was listening to Anza saying that part of, I think what we're working towards is really doing a worked example, except we don't have any of the real framework yet. But it's literally mocking our way through it.
Yeah, but look how
I think we can sort of see where it's going. But the reason I say that is in the sense doing the exercise deliberately to get to the end and saying, okay, yes, you could build this, but would it actually deliver on the idea I had in my mind's eye at outset? And how widely would one or should one apply it? All these practical things that when you get to the next stage, standing in front of a room full of people saying, yeah, but it doesn't really interest me, that you've got something a little more to say, well, raise your eyes up from the ground and consider what you might do and be able to give them an example, which at the moment is hard for us to do because we're talking about something we've thought about a lot in the collective sense.
Right, so this is the interface to the Descript app. Hugely interesting. Like on the side here, speaker, you can teach it who the speakers are. In order to take full advantage of that, we probably would need an API from them. Because they do a lot of what we want already. But they don't have built-in timestamps. And they don't have it exported in a format that we can readily.
I think you can add the timestamps because you can see the timestamps at the bottom, and then I think it's a matter of showing on the text itself. But
yeah, Frode, go in and delete. Go in and select one of the ums, and then delete it, and it will also update the audio and delete it from the audio. So you could select it. You can change to something else if it mistranscribed.
Oh yeah, the overdub is basically after it learns your voice, you can make it say anything that you wanted to say.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, right?
Oh, is that the kind of thing that Microsoft showed a few years ago?
Yeah, also Adobe, I think, showed it first. And then, that's where all of the deep fake things started showing up.
So, Raphael, do you know who's what? I mean, it's really cool bit of kit. Do you know who is there a primary context or group of users that are using this tool? A particular community or something?
Conferences.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
so it's basically do fast
presentations. Yeah, and also internal meetings where they have to document things.
Yes, good point. Yeah. Something else that I can't remember was either yourself or Adam was talking about. It was about ebooks, and I was thinking, well, it's not just ebooks. It's like I'm reading a book at the moment. It's very historical. It's full of dates, but trying to hold that timeline in my mind. And I was thinking that there's a service you can get for cookbooks where you tell it the cookbooks you own, and it allows you to access them in digital form. And what I really want I want to read books. I don't want an ebook of it. What I want is I want the digital glossary bit of it. I was laughing when you said I thought you were going to utter the immortal words. I wanted to just show me the interesting bits, Cliff's notes.
No, those apps, there's a bunch that are showing up that they do visual reviews and visual summaries of a bunch of books, but it's mostly those concept self-help books or whatever's in the top 10 of Amazon that they do. But I was just thinking, like, you input any book and he spits the structured information of the contents of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of being able to have essentially and not for every book, because not every book needs it, but having in a sense a sort of an organized visual, software entity for the book. More than just having a list of what they are, but the sort of thing, especially where things like books have a very strong timeline in them, that aren't historic so much as, or you're reading about the early days of the internet or something. So wait a minute, did this happen before that, or which country did this happen in?
Yeah,
because it all becomes smushed together after a while. So you can either go with the flow of the narrative, or you can stop down and close read it, at which point you lose all sense of what's going on, and you may end up with lots of notes. But you almost have to then read the whole thing again just to get the overview story. And so a way to capture, in a sense, whether it's a digital document or something that's not in paper, not in digital form, or is sort of has a scanned placeholder. I think is quite an interesting idea, and I don't know where that goes. I just think but to me, what that's really doing, that's another way. What you're basically doing is you're capturing metadata, and why are you capturing metadata? We're back at the same place, so you can do clever things with this. So you can start to do the stuff that you can't do by just trying to spin all the plates in your head at once.
Yeah. Because I was trying to look for a book. It's called A Brief History of Encyclopedias, and it's full of dates and names and things that I would love to have an overview. Like, this guy made this woman made this person did this in this place. Yeah. And then, from there, I could do a deep dive on that research to find more about it. But I have to keep flipping through the book to find the bits that I highlighted. And then that's when I started using 3 different highlight colors. One for names, one for dates, and one for things.
That's an interesting thing I've begun to know, because I've been sort of, to keep my book buying within sensible limits, I've been buying lots of previously cherished books. And it's very interesting that it shows the feel where the number that arrive and the first chapter or about the first few pages are furiously underlined, and then nothing for the rest of the book, which also looks suspiciously like it's never had the pages fully turned.
So it's interesting to look at this tool while we're together here. It looks quite impressive, but I'm just wondering, since we've been talking about showing something on the 9th of December, if there's anything around this we should try to implement.
Implementation-wise, I've been banging my head against the wall trying to synchronize the output from the IMBA system with the configuration of my shared hosting server that I'm using at Namecheap. And that's somewhat frustrating. IMBA wants to put out a beautiful little pre-bundled packet. The trouble is the virtual file system set up on the shared host for node-based applications winds up expecting files in different places than the bundling system assumes. So I've had to go through and read through the source code for the bundler to figure that out, or try to get an unbundled version operating on the server. So it's going to be a lot of painful trial and error. Once I get through that, then anything that I'm writing that runs on my Mac, I'll be able to deploy so that you guys can just punch it up over the web and have a look at it. But there's a lot of just engineering pain at the moment that I'm going through.
Where are we related to Adam's, that little infographic timeline he made? Are we going to present that?
I don't know. It depends a little bit on what happens Tuesday week when Bent and I present Visual Meta to the community, if it's actually in there, or if it's going to be later, or, it's until it's happened, we just don't know. But, the one thing I don't want us to do is another demo. So if we present a timeline citation view, it should be an extensible one that people can use, rather than a kind of a mock-up, which I think we all agree on.
What was behind my sort of question about, well, who's using this thing? So, I mean, I can instantly see the affordances of Descript, or, something doing this thing. And I can still see, yeah, I'm doing sort of conference transcription or something like that because it's a need and someone's going to pay for it, and there are all these drivers. So the thing is, with what we're doing, yes, we all know in the diffuse sense we listen to a podcast or we take part in a conversation like this, and it's useful to get back at stuff. But that's actually quite an abstract sell. It's useful for the people it's useful for, but I doubt that's going to have people leaping off their chairs into the air, because it's great, but then it's got to be implemented. I'm just wondering how we can, if we wanted to show it, how we do it in a way that moves it beyond saying, here's some more cool software doing something. Because I found myself talking to Fred this morning about stuff to do with Visual Meta, but I said my takeaway at this point is what we're showing people isn't the important thing. It's trying to sell beyond. It's trying to get round all the tire kickers saying, I'm not really interested, and say, no, look, this is the necessary footsteps we have to go along to get to the richer stuff beyond. We can't just jump from where we are to that magical, picture in your mind. We have to do something along the way. And some of the things we make may be a bit hokey and they need replacing, but then we don't know what to replace them with until we've really used whatever we have enough to know what we got wrong or what just wasn't available at the time. All the unknown unknowns will sort of begin to come to surface. Ellen.
Couple of thoughts on that. One, just some background on Descript, and I could have this remembered wrong. It's from a podcast I heard several years ago, but I believe the founder, the guy who made Descript, was like part of Groupon or something like this. He leaves this kind of like a sort of unicorn company of that ilk, if it's not Groupon, something like it, makes a startup for giving tours around cities. And Descript, in much the same way that Slack came out of making a video game, Descript came out of, it was an internal tool for people who are recording and working on and trying to come to an agreement about what's the best way to give a tour of a particular city, right? So in that sense, it has a real particular use case, but a really painful, solves a real problem. And I'd argue maybe, and this may actually apply to the talk somewhat, if there's a theme that we can see in things like Descript and Gong, is commutability that's happening between audio and text and video, where we're starting to expect to have them extracted and be perusable in any different format, right? By that, mainly, I mean that it reduces back down to text. And that should be a first-class citizen, not just an export.
Sorry, everyone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, multiple devices screaming. I apologize.
No problem.
Let's all ring through.
I will
The
now
Apple
mute in case that happens
ecosystem,
again.
the whole Apple
Like we just
ecosystem is
leapt into a carnival.
calling your
Yeah.
I shall mute.
So there's a theme there, and that also, even though it seems like in the podcast use case, okay, Descript is interesting, but it seems like that's an edge case. Well, I'd argue that it's very quickly becoming a mainstream hardcore use case, because I know in my world, every one of my meetings is recorded.
Yeah.
And I go through the transcript in most of my meetings to find out what we talked about last time, and it's pivotal for the next meeting, right? So the ground is changing underneath us within just the course of 2 years, right?
Yeah. And I hasten to add, I hope I mean, my question wasn't sort of from the perspective of, yeah, but it's okay, but what is it? It was more that it was really getting back to this, you see the really interesting point you bring out there. They came out of something else, and I'm thinking, can we think the other way down that line? And so I say, okay, so what's our point where what is there hiding inside what we're doing at the moment that becomes sensible? Beyond, the good intent of finding good ideas and not letting them slip from sight. And I don't know the answer, but that's sort of that was what was at the back of my mind.
I like that a lot. One thing I brought up last time that is maybe not within the realm of feasible, but I'll bring it up anyway. was the idea of like a VS Code type plugin that you could see while you're editing the visual meta suggestions or connections to other content within some sort of scoped corpus. But before diving into that solution, the reason behind it comes from, like, I'd say the failure of semantic web is that everybody, all the material that came out about it, all the excitement was, here's how to do this, now you can do this. And never was it about, here's what you get out of it, you know, or let me see immediate value. Let me see that I can have a much more rich search that I never imagined before, you know? And so whatever the solution is, again, you know, if we had time and power, money to make something, it would be to show that end goal. This is what you get out of it after you, like, say, organized 5 to 12 documents. Now suddenly it's this much easier.
Yeah. So on that note, I've unmuted and made sure no one can contact me. First, a little bit defensively. I know you weren't attacking Visual Meta, but an important defensive point is most of what Visual Meta can be in software is what I would call retained metadata. So there's actually zero effort. I think that's really, really important.
Agreed.
Yeah, and then the second half of the defensiveness is once it's in Visual Meta, then anybody with relatively competent computer skills can take advantage of it. Of course, it should be in a piece of software. Now, more directly to your point, Alan, this time thing has been bugging me for at least 10 years. Can we, you know, and there's things like UTC, there are many, many standards out there, but can we, like we used BibTeX for normal Visual Meta, can we cobble together some existing standards like UTC and stuff and make, sorry, back to Visual Meta again. One of the key things with Visual Meta is not just back of the PDF. It is, of course, what happens when you copy text from a PDF. It includes the Visual Meta, right? Can we do Visual Meta for time? So that anybody can develop any kind of timeline or any kind of calendar, and you can just copy and paste between them. Maybe the iCal standard could help us there, because having this amazing high-tech sci-fi feature, product, Descript, is amazing. But if it's going to be another silo, not quite as amazing.
I have a thought. Well, I'll let others go first.
Go for it.
I just think in terms of the time, because one of the things that we need to think about in the context is what time, in a sense, what time we're recording. Because one of the things often our sort of mechanistic tools do for us is they inadvertently, because they know better, capture the wrong thing. So, it's no interest to me when I added this interesting thing to the timeline. I was adding it to the timeline because I wanted to say that actually 2 months ago in this meeting, at this point where someone said this thing. So, it's a bit like names. Time is in that sense a little bit slippery. And I don't know, because, I literally, as I sit here, it's not something I've read into. I don't know how much work or writing or thought there has been around that. So yes, we have UTC. So what we have a time that, when used as a timestamp, is arguably now global and sort of can be understood and used by anything. What we perhaps don't have are the affordances around it. So we know how to say when something is. What we are less well advanced in is finding the sort of the correct and easy way to record the right time in that timestamp, which we do know how to create. I put my hand down.
Mr. Wasilico.
Yes, I really like podcasts because they're an eyes-free medium, especially like when I'm dusting my library and I'm up on the step ladder at the top of the room, I can still be productively taking in content. So anything we can do that isn't necessarily dependent upon looking at a screen could be useful. A few years back, I was toying with the idea of what would it be like if we had an audio-only RDF triple kind of a system. So imagine you could query verbally for Frode, wife, birthday, and then have the system retrieve the date for use while you're walking around, or you see someone out on the street and you touch your little earpiece, pay attention to me button, and have Fred Smith, employer, to find out where he works, just to help jog your memory. And I was looking for whether there was anything that would let me build something like that at the time. And I figured, well, what I really need, I don't need an accurate transcription of the identifiers. What I need is a way to have blurb of audio. It doesn't even need to have a name associated with blurb of audio corresponding to an attribute and blurb of audio corresponding to a value. So I was looking around and I found there was one professor who basically built that. I got in touch with him and said, you got this great technology. You can recognize these arbitrary audio fragments. Can we get an API for this to be able to use it? And he said, oh no, he's looking to sell it for money so that he could go and retire early to someone in the music industry. And anyone that wasn't one of the major recording labels contacting him, he didn't want to know about them. It is so frustrating, but the idea of having, a pure audio interface to a hypertext web would be incredibly exciting, because you could use it on the go when you have to have your eyes away from the screen. So that could be something worth looking and thinking about. Hopefully by now someone else has replicated that ability to match arbitrary audio blobs. That was maybe 15 years ago when I tried to contact that guy. And again, since I wasn't a record label, he didn't want to have anything to do with the conversation, couldn't care less about all of its potential benefits to the world of hypertext or any other use case domain. He figured, okay, I want to have BMI contact me, pay me enough money so that I can go off and retire to Tahiti and never think about computers or work or anything ever again. Hire a professional accountant to take care of all the paperwork and just be done and check out.
Yeah, that's humanity for you.
I'll just add on the time thing. It seems like, it's a frustrating problem for a while. It seems like we're getting closer and closer to a more intelligent solution where even natural language can be used and compiled to a general understanding or agreement of the time that X happened. The next step, which is arguably more difficult, but it's that a timestamp in some cases is very valuable, but a context timestamp would be more valuable, to know that when this little clump of conversation, and imagine, it's easier to imagine an SMS back and forth, that two people are talking about this one topic right now, and even though the next statement is chronologically the next statement, it's actually referring to something from last Tuesday, right? Getting a sense of that would be far more useful in unstructured texts like what we're having now, and also in books.
I half agree with you there, Alan.
Great.
I think that context should be freely available at all times. So you should be able to easily navigate however you want contextually, so that you can then perform things like, basically queries and views and all of that good stuff. I'm a little concerned about putting too much by the system. But the thing we discussed before about being able to somehow mark up bits of conversation as having more pertinence to yourself, that is of course a layer of context that's, it's a glossing, of course, right? It's a glossing over audio, which is useful in itself. But it may turn out, of course, and I see you nodding here, I'm sure we agree, that a different context would be more important later.
Yeah, I think we can even agree on that. There's a principle underneath that. Maybe this is even something to bring up in the demo or explore more, because you have it in your latest demo where you show the line that says interesting and the other parts are sort of grayed out.
Yeah.
And that kind of leveling of context where you can always still see the ground, but you have your different figures at different degrees of you know, attention, is a very useful thing. You should always be able to see the ground at which you know, matter was disrupted and words were formed, and then but explore in that upper region.
Yeah. So many hands. Okay, Peter.
As once again, I start rambling on with my mute button toggled. We also want to be able to have the notion of multiple overlapping contexts too, because I might be talking about programming while also talking about visual meta, while also talking about ideas that we inherited from Doug and Ted. So each one of those contexts is simultaneously overlapping for a given fragment of audio. That's why, again, I like the quasi-mode idea, because you could have a palette of currently active contexts and simultaneously select and have some of them drop in and out from the contextual stream. So you could almost imagine the context as identified by the speaker as being a temporal stream in a different time band than the actual audio fragments themselves.
Agreed. The context, maybe what's going on here is a revolt against search results, and that being the first level of opposition, because that's an example of saying that the device is so comfortable with its results that it can just give you a search result as if it's a bullet point, and that should be the correct answer. And it leads to really hilarious misunderstandings, like this. I have this thread I can throw in of where Google answers questions like, when did Tom Hanks land on the moon? And it'll pop up the answer, 1960, you know, and people are just getting wrong information this way because the UI is expressing far more confidence than it should be.
Yeah, that's a problem. Absolutely. Mark?
Well, take last thing first. It happens just as you're saying is listening to the sense of, okay, so time or points in time have these various relationships. So one of the things that says to me, so yeah, effectively you've got temporal trails. You know, it's just there are trails in another context of our metadata, which to anyone who's happy with the notion of a trail is hardly mind-blowing, but it's a good reminder to sort of think, to hold on to the notion of that. I just kind of think that the now sort of gone back in the conversation, but there was I think it was, I don't know, forgive me, it was talking about sort of shifting between voice and audio and text and things. And what's quite interesting is how the different affordances. So sometimes the spoken audio goes too slowly. I mean, I listen to most videos on YouTube at about 1.5 to 2 times speed. That's it. Well, I'm an English speaker, and I'm normally listening to someone who's speaking English, so that within that narrow band, that works quite well just to push the bandwidth, push the speed rather along a bit. So there is this interesting thing about where you want to drop in and out of these different. It's almost like a gear change. You want to get closer to the detail or closer to the overall time frame, and I just sort of sense there's something interesting in that. I don't know what the relationship is. The other thing, going back to the point about semantic web, the thing that I think is also missed there is the complete absence of the humans in it. I would argue that the semantic web people made exactly the same mistake as the AI people are making at the moment. It all seems to be about computers and not about humans. We're losing sight on why we're doing.
I agree so much.
It doesn't have to be that way, but so for instance, in this sort of curation we're talking about, one of the things that we forget to stop to ask is, where do we want a human to be in the loop? They don't have to be, but the point is, if we build it in such a way that the human somehow now got to be some high-level programmer just to be able to do anything more than the most trivial, I think we got it wrong again. So this is why, in a way, it does seem familiar, some of the stuff we're doing in the semantic web, but I just think they got it fundamentally wrong. Too many engineers in the room.
Agreed.
I completely agree. And even my first text for the book, The Future of Text, I talked about that, you know, that humans were left behind, because it seems like we're doing a lot of technology things for technology's sake. And at the end of the day, we're still eating, we're still walking around, we're still having conversations in real life, we're still doing everything in the physical world. You know, we're not in this, we don't have singularity yet. And even when we do, I think it's going to be a choice to be in it or to be, you know, like we're online, we're not online, we're in the singularity, we're not in the singularity. So I think the analog lifestyle and the analog life has to be, you know, complemented by the digital life. It's not a replacement. I don't think it's ever going to be a replacement. If it is a replacement, it's going to be just like that Black Mirror episode, the San Junipero, where people choose when to die and they're in servers living alternate realities as they please for all eternity, if they so choose.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be people plus tech for sure. I wrote this thing this morning. You can't. Oh, that's funny, because I actually used voice transcription. I was going to show off how good it is. It's an error in the very first bit. But what I was trying to say is you can't evolve society if you don't also evolve how society thinks and communicates.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes to both sides of this. And this is, of course, what Doug was on and on about, the human tool system, co-evolution and all of that. And, you know, that can be viewed positively or negatively on both sides. People must upgrade their game, but we must also upgrade the way the systems interact with us to make them fit the human better. No question about both of them.
Yeah, well, and another aspect of this is far too often, I get speaking to Raphael's observation of the fact that, you know, it's often, you know, just more tech it's also the framing I begin to worry about. It's always about making things easier, but it's not really that. It's basically helping me be lazy. I don't want to have to remember this. And it's underpants gnomes all over. You know, if I don't have to remember this, I'll have more time to do something more fruitful, like, I don't know, read TikTok or something. You know, amazingly.
Oh yeah,
we
haven't talked about TikTok today.
We don't necessarily actually produce stuff that helps us more, that gives us more, apart from often people who are really quite close to particular tools. So, you know, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, in this community, I take that as being kind of a given that we do use technology for something useful. There is way too much demoing coolness and all that. Absolutely. Who was not here when we talked about TikTok recently?
I think I wasn't. Was it Friday?
Because I've just started TikTok.
Oh, no.
Should I put my hands over my ears at this point, Fred?
Be careful. You're walking into rough terrain.
If you're an old ignorant man, yes, you should do that, Mark, but I don't believe you are. No, okay, let me just repeat as quickly as I can why I think TikTok is phenomenally interesting. You know, first we start with Twitter. Twitter was, as far as I know, the world's first mass-to-mass communications medium, which made it absolutely amazing in that regard. The things that really fascinates me with TikTok, and yes, like in all other media, 95% of the content of TikTok is rubbish. Of course it is. It is fixed to a specific medium. You have to watch it on your phone. It has to be in portrait mode. You cannot watch it on a computer. You cannot watch it on a TV screen. That's interesting. Secondly, there is nothing but content. You scroll up, you're seeing one person's video. You scroll up, it's another person's video. On Instagram, you have frames and comments around a picture. Here, it is only the video with overlaid stuff. But the really human side of it that absolutely mesmerizes me, there's a lot of jokes and bikinis, you know, to get attention, fair enough. But then in the middle of that, you scroll down and it says tap for live. And whatever that person is doing, sometimes they're just making dinner. It's live right there. It's like you're watching FaceTime with a friend, but it's right there and you start typing to that person. And you never know what you're going to get in this. I find it absolutely amazing. I haven't subscribed to many people. Sylvester Stallone's daughter is one because they're very cute together. But other than that, it's just random. right? So you go down and then suddenly you come across a life story. You know, one woman, you see her looking all pretty and you realize she was, by her own words, a crack whore, what she's gone through to get her life together. It's like, what? Why is this on TikTok? And she says straight out, this is my therapy. I can't talk straight to a person. Therefore, I talk kind of to the world, so to speak. Fair enough. It has, because of that, holding it, you have to hold it in your face. And you never know if it's going to be live, jokey, or serious. Absolutely incredible. And like we talked a little bit about a few days ago, for those who were here, it is, can we get some of that intimacy into the videos we do together? Can we maybe, I can't remember who said it, but someone talking about replying in video. And can we take some of that interaction, smoothness, and again, intimacy into the text part of things? It is so provocative. I bother my wife several times a day. If I'm making lunch or something, it's TikToks in the background. It's just like, what the hell is this? And they have all these little cultural things, like they ask a question, and then you have the writing on the screen for the answers, and there's always the same song, dong, dong, dong kind of a song. And they have to do this thing like this and this stuff, like some kind of childish dance or something. I have no idea how it happened, but it did happen. It's completely new.
Yeah, that go ahead.
No, I don't think the digital experience will ever come close to a real life experience. Like having 2-3 people in a room, you know, in a conference or in any kind of physical space, it's a completely different experience because you see all of the nuances of people's interactions.
But it's not trying to replicate that,
gestures.
Raphael.
It's not, but I'm just saying, you mentioned how can we bring a little bit more maybe humanity to the meetings, or
I'm just saying, like in Homo Deus, there's a great line of writing was invented to solve different problems than speech. Very often today we hear, oh, writing is not as intimate as talking to the person. Of course it's not. It's doing an entirely different thing. You know, we don't need to go through what. TikTok is not a movie. It's not YouTube. It's not writing. It's completely fucking weird. Pardon my French. It is such a, you know, I'm going to binge on it a little bit longer, and then because of the similarities, I think I'll just stop like a lot of people. But do try it. It is a medium that I don't think could have been pre-invented. I think they had to iterate so much for this to happen.
I'll thoughts on that. A couple thoughts. One thing I do love about TikTok and other things like it, which you could also say the internet or Twitter, in relief to, there was a conversation on Twitter I slightly got involved with, but it's this people getting very excited about ideas being atoms and atomic thoughts, and that supports the whole graph and nonlinearity and Rome and all this, and it's so exciting. And I'm all for innovation in that space, but it also smacks of the exact kind of ideas that are wrong because we are relying too much on a metaphor. When you see something like TikTok, there is no metaphor for it. It happens. It smashes all previous conceptions of what's sticky, you know, and ideas or approaches that are so grounded in the humanities. If they stick close to a metaphorical understanding of, say, like ideas or atoms, they tend not to work. And semantic web may be a great example of this. You know, you take TikTok, you could contrast it to semantic web, or you could contrast it to Facebook's new multiverse horizons thing, which is really just people sitting in a boardroom, and you realize that is the result of people thinking metaphorically and saying, let's put this into virtual space, let's make this more interesting. And it doesn't seem at all, maybe it'll have its value as they iterate over it, but then versus something like TikTok, which seems like an accident.
So you can sit in a virtual room and read virtual PDFs.
There you go. Yeah.
But in fairness,
also, and I'm going to be really cruel to you guys because I love you all. Earlier in the conversation, when you talked about technology should be for humans, I really think humans have a real duty to step up as well, because otherwise there will be more of that. People will understand the boardroom. Let's build a boardroom. To spend that bit of, I'm a gamer, as you all know. I absolutely love learning. Oh my God, this rifle with this thing and pressing these buttons. Oh, maybe I can do it better. That's what gamers do. It's the same thing with graphics people. Like a lot of what you talked about in the beginning today, Alan, is what you can do in Photoshop. You command click to add, you shift click to remove from, option click. I can't remember. It's in my hands, not my head. Raphael knows exactly what I mean.
Yep.
But that kind of interactions with text, yes, absolutely, we need to go there. But remember, it's not that long ago. You saw a business person, especially with a suit, sitting with a laptop, typing as far away as possible in case the screen would come down and bite his fingers, right? Usually him in that sense. No intimacy. You won't see a gamer being, allergic to the controller. You get in and you are there. If we get more of that mentality, the graphics professional and the gamer into knowledge work, we can build much more exciting things. But
a typewriter
you have to be open for it.
As I said, but a typewriter, the step before that was more personal. You got to know your typewriter really well and its foibles, and it's because it was probably still an early mechanical system. But one observation about the TikTok thing is,
I think you're right, Mark. But
what I see is people selling the dopamine. It's the emotive hit, but it's a very narrow interpretation of emotion. So there's a requirement that you all emote in the expected way, and if you don't, that's problematic because that marks you are immediately in the out group. So it's weaponizing. I think. I mean, I just notice around me. Just a different point that what I notice around me is everyone is using.
But Mark,
everyone is using all the social media around me, and what's it doing is actually entirely now pictures of kittens and baby otters and all sorts of other cute animals. But I'm not sure that there's anything else useful being done by it.
Right. So everything you just said could be said to any new media. It was said about books. It was said about writing. It's going to be lurid text.
TikTok is not a medium. TikTok is just a way of delivering video through any capsulated word. It's not a new medium. I think that's overstretching the description.
Would you call social media a medium? In the sense that, would you say that Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all of them, is that one cohesive thing? Or would you say that it's the device that's the medium? Or would you say that Twitter is a different medium from Facebook?
It's a style. I don't know. I call it a medium because they use technology in different ways. It's more the social behavior that's enacted through it. So a lot of it is basically about capturing attention, instant feedback, dopamine hit, scroll for more.
Let me read a couple of quotes from this part. So this book is organized in different revenges, and then the first one is Revenge of Vinyl, and then Revenge of Paper, Revenge of Film, and now I'm on the chapter of board games. And I think that combines well with what Frode was saying for video games. And while I do agree that video games provide a rich experience, and it's related to pressing buttons on Photoshop, it says, this very human need for social interaction lies at the heart of the revenge of tabletop games. Individually, then collectively, we realized the virtual world could never provide us with enough bandwidth to associate each other the other way we want. There's never going to be a virtual environment as completely engaging as the physical environment is. Online is only a good substitute when we can't meet. When we're together in a social space environment, we're kind of free to each other to be more complete, more full, and more yourself. You can't get that from a computer. You can get engaged, you can get excited, but not feel more alive.
I find that absolutely offensive. No, the reason I find it offensive is, there are very different personalities and there are very different, mindsets and so on. Some people need to be on the dance floor and spin around. Other people want to sit at home and read a book. So that is essentially saying the person reading the book is a nerd, because they are communicating with the past through the boring media of text. The one on the dance floor is with people. I think it's absolute rubbish.
No, I don't think. I don't think it's that, because on the Revenge of Print, it explains. For example, you don't get the same experience from a Kindle that you get from a book, because here you have texture, you have the paper, you have the sound it makes. So it's
Raphael,
that's the kinds of different.
It's like saying
it's
like writing a book on the revenge of chocolate ice cream because there's been too much strawberry, right? It's like trying to cash in on McLuhanisms. McLuhan really had this stuff mapped out. New media reverses into itself. Old media. There is a tetrad. There are things. This has been really thought through. I'm not saying that TikTok is replacing stuff and is the best medium in the world. I'm absolutely not saying that. But I am also not saying that reading a book is better than talking to someone. They're completely different interactions. If Socrates was here, we'd have that discussion with them. So when I talk about something like TikTok, I'm just saying that kind of stuff really should help us loosen our thinking, because it's on the surface, it's absolute nonsense. Of course it is. But then you remember mobile phones? Well, some of you are too young. When mobile phones came in, a lot of people said, if it's important, they will call back. Why would you want to be interrupted when you're out walking? That's insane, right?
Plus the phones were this big then.
Yeah, they were a bit big. So I think the insights of back and forth is really interesting, Raphael, but I think we should be wary of one medium equals better than the other, because also for a lot of people, especially people with autism, who's a huge amount of people in our field, even being on a call like this is too much. Like Christopher Gutteridge, absolute genius, love him to death. He cannot take part in this meeting. It takes too much from him. Face-to-face meeting with more than one or two people, forget it. Via text, not a problem for him.
Yeah,
so that was my little loving and respectful rant.
No, I just want to say that I'm not an analog side. I'm always like trying to combine both. So it's nice to hear somebody that is documenting, the return of all these analog things that have been happening. Vinyl has been opening stores all over the place, and even tabletop games, and all of these things. So it's nice to see we're reaching a point of so when a digital medium comes out, the analog is destroyed until it is reestablished in a different light. So it's nice to see where things are getting established and reaching this new norm. And I think TikTok is part of still the social media ecosystem that I don't think we have reached something that is like a normal or something.
Yeah, I'm going to give it over to Peter in a second. I'm looking at what Alan said here about plasticity. That's absolutely key. When you look at the invention of writing, and if you read something like Reading in the Brain by Stanislas Dehaene, he talks about how it's neuronal recycling, using brain cells for something they've been able to do, but in a new way. Because we're not going to be able to use our brain to think in a completely different way than our brains are wired for immediately. That's not going to happen. But anyway, yeah, Peter, you've had your hand on forever.
Okay, first, Raphael, could you hold that book cover up square in front of the cam so I can grab a quick screenshot of it? Okay, perfect. All right. Now, when we were mentioning the simulated boardroom and all, that sort of technology even went back into the world of pure text. In the early 90s in MediaMove, we had Gopher slates that we'd pass around. So you'd had the textual Gopher interface embedded inside of the Zorkish style text only virtual world simulation. And we even had people collaborating on shared editors where you'd pass the editor virtual object, and it was all done just in the text in the Moo environment to someone else who would do a little editing on it and pass it back to you and the other people. So that sort of modeling and older technology and the newer technology, just like a recurring pattern that happens over and over again. I'm sure when we have 3D motion capture avatars, people will be sitting down in front of simulated roll top desks with fancier graphics, but the patterns are going to recur.
Yeah.
Virtual avatar playing a tabletop game. That's going to be pretty fun.
I threw in some notes in there. I'm gonna have to jump off in a minute, but one of the points I made earlier that is maybe worth another discussion, because I don't think it's reconciled, is the idea, if you believe that we've kind of, over time, culture has shifted from an oral culture to a literary culture, now we're moving back to orality. I don't remember whose idea it was, maybe Walter Ong or something. And if TikTok and Twitter and all this are examples of moving into sort of an oral, you could argue that a tweet is more like speaking than it is typing than writing. For another thing, the question is the knowledge work, or is the academic world so anchored to and embedded in the literary approach that it can't translate to or whatever meaningfully into the physical, oral, expressive world? Is there some knowledge that is there a channel, if those are two massive themes of ways to communicate, oral and literary, some knowledge only accessible via the literary?
Right, a lot of stuff there. First of all, the whole thing about Twitter, unfortunately, I think the Economist covered this. When you tweet, it's seen as like almost spoken, it's a dialogue, but it's read as written. So you can write something casually, but then later on it's written as though you wrote it in stone. So that's a very interesting thing, how the reading and writing is almost the opposite. The history of academia in this sense is very, very interesting, because it's basically the humanities that made written academia what it is today. Because Petrarch and these people, they felt that, hey, let's go back to the Romans and they did all the brilliant stuff and let's just discuss that for a better tomorrow. They were all about using citations from the olden times to justify a better tomorrow. So there's also a bit of an ethical position on this. And then, of course, as professionalisms happened, people had to have, it's funny, I'm noticing more of my errors in speech now that I know we're probably going to transcribe this. It's very weird. You had guilds before, but when you had professional societies, you didn't really have the opportunity to make a medieval guild. So what you do, you make a lingo. You change how you use the word for that, and you decide that academically we have to look different from those other guys. Really arbitrary nonsense. However, the split between written and vocal, I think there are many more interesting splits. One of them is visual. Writing can be good, but also a lot of it can just be pure pictures and pure video. So I think that we're moving into a place where a lot of our nerve cells are just going to have to be torn apart and put together again in entirely new ways, because we're dividing so much of this, like science versus philosophy, or the arts versus the sciences. This is all artificial bullshit. So I think that some academic principles will have a harder time adjusting than others. But we need people like Vint. The October issue of ACM Communications, he's going to be talking about visual meta, and he says some really beautiful things. He's an old timer in terms of age, but he has the stature to say, come on, people, listen, right? Because all of us bubbling around doing something, we need those super tankers to pull things through, right? Mm-hmm. And that's partly why for this volume of Future of Text, we've got a lot more politicians, former prime minister from Latvia, Romania, Mauritius, all these places, because they're also academics. The question of what is the future of text, hopefully we'll get to a point where the discussions we're having today, even though I'm absolutely loving this bit, will seem utterly arcane. We're talking like horseless carriage compared to what we will hopefully do soon. But in order to do that, we need the freedom to think. And freedom to think is really, really hard, because freedom to think is also economic. If you think too freely, you're crazy. Right? If you think too structured, you get something done, but it doesn't actually get you to the next level of evolution, right? So how do you provide enough people with the energy to make those little jumps in different directions? And when they go somewhere nonsense, they go further down, we can put them back up. How do you do that? Anyway, that's what universities were supposed to be. I don't think that's what they're doing now. We need to make these sessions longer. It takes us about an hour to get going. Have you noticed, guys?
Yeah. Something I'd love to talk with Vint about sometime is reference in this book again, where Mr. Clark talks about how the early internet suffered from the engineers thinking too hierarchically, and coming up with solutions hierarchically, because that was pretty much all that was available then, right? And I think that we're still 40 years later suffering downstream from, as you like, if you think too freely, then the only way that your message can be passed is in high fidelity. It can't be what am I thinking? Dimensionally reduced into a more portable channel, because you can't categorize it. And then if you do have something that is easily categorized, then what are you actually saying, other than just pushing the ones and zeros forward, because you basically turned yourself into a decision tree.
Confucius said that if Confucius said if he was the ruler, the first thing he would do is make sure everything had the correct name. But of course, giving them the correct names is the work.
Yeah.
And changing them. I'm going to stop the recording, and so everything is public. And